Welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Dr. Vivian Carlin. Between our two households, we're navigating life with 10 children, so we know how chaotic parenting can be. As Johns Hopkins trained pediatricians, we also know the science. Our goal is to bring you the best of both worlds, medically sound, trustworthy advice, and practical, real-world insights as we dive into the trials and triumphs of parenting. Please note this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor. So today we're doing an episode on sleep. And if you haven't already listened to our previous episode on the infant sleep schedule and babies sleeping through the night, I would suggest that if that's your age group that you're struggling with right now. But today we are going to discuss sleep problems in the older child and our advice on what to do with that.
Okay, so when I think about sleep disturbance in the young child, preschool, early school aged, even later school aged, I think it can fall into different categories. So it could be difficulty going to bed, difficulty falling asleep. It could be difficulty with waking up in the night and not being able to go back to sleep. It could be difficulty with waking up too early. Or it could be difficulty with not wanting to sleep alone, not wanting to be in your own bed. And when you put all of those together, the best statistic we have is maybe 20%, 1 in 5. Like, this is very common that somewhere along the way kids will experience one of these problems. Sometimes it's very short-lived. It might just be a one and done, or it might just be a very infrequent thing that happens. I think it becomes more of a disturbance if you see a pattern where this is 2 or 3 times a week, and now we've been like 2 or 3 months and it's expected we're going to have trouble with this with some regularity, this going to sleep or staying asleep in our room.
And when we see this in the office, parents are tired. Their child is older now, they're past the infancy stage, their child is waking up multiple times a night, they're trying their best or they're having trouble going down at night, and eventually tired parents, what they wind up doing is opening their bed to their child. There's 4, possibly 5 people sleeping in their bed, and the parents come to the office and they're like, this needs to change because no one's getting good sleep now, right? Like, even though we're tired, we start in the bed in the evening, and then they all wind up in our bed by the morning, and it's just exhausting and tiring. So I can't wait to hear your stories on this one, Vivian.
Oh, yes. There are stories to be had on this one. So if you listen to our infant sleep training, then you know that when my children were babies, I was all about sleep training. And so I generally had very good sleepers as infants. But that didn't protect me from these sleep disturbances that came up later that are so common.
So
okay.
Tell me a story. When did you see these types of child sleep problems in your family?
Yeah, so with my 6 children, we've run the gamut at some point. I've definitely had the child that goes through a phase where they do not want to be in their room by themselves. I have definitely had the child that goes through the phase of, I am just not tired. I'm trying to go to sleep and I'm not tired. I've also had the child that is waking up at night. Sometimes it might be due to nightmares, or sometimes it might be just something woke them up and they can't go back to bed and they're afraid to go back in their own room, so they're coming to my room. I did not have the child that is consistently waking up early. That was one of the issues that I didn't have, but all of the others I experienced.
So in my family, we had only a couple of them. So one of them was that, like, they're now waking up at night and then coming into our room. And my children were early risers, where 5 a.m. they were up and ready to start their day. I think between you and I, we probably cover a lot of these sleep disturbance type issues.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to find, this isn't a one-size-fits-all fix. There's like general ideas we can give, but I think with all things in parenting, but with this, parents should feel the freedom to figure out what works best for you and your child, right? And that's going to look different in different ways. And I suspect you and I handled this very differently.
Yes. And I also want to acknowledge that culturally, some cultures really firmly believe in the family bed, where multiple members of the family sleep in the bed. The children are having trouble sleeping, then they sleep together. Or I've heard where there's a mattress in the kid's room and grandparent will be there and the child will co-sleep with the grandparent. I usually don't offer advice in the office unless they're seeking advice. The one piece of advice I do give with the family bed situation is there's always a risk of falling out of the bed. And, I don't want people to get a whole new bedroom set. Sometimes I tell people that means moving your mattress onto the floor.
Yeah.
They roll off, it's just a foot, and then everybody's fine.
Yeah, I agree. We're talking about what is best for your family,
Right.
and there should be some freedom in making that decision. I fully agree with that.
What about you? Did you do any type of co-sleeping?
Yeah, okay, so I want to give you a little background about me. So I have always hated sleeping in a room by myself.
Oh, really?
So,
Like personally, for you?
Yeah, personally. I have one sibling. He's 9 years younger than me. And when I was 9 and when he was born, I asked to have a mattress on the floor where his crib was so that I could sleep in the same room. Like I did not like sleeping on my own. And so when I went to college and shared a room, this was like a dream for me, right? I had multiple apartments as I moved around where to save money, the apartment might be where like every room had 2 people in it. This was awesome for me. Like I loved having other people in the room. So as I've evolved into my adulthood, right, I obviously acquired my husband who sleeps in the room with me. At one point we had 2 dogs sleeping in the room with us. I was used to like multiple living beings in the room with me. But here's a caveat. I hate having people sleeping in the bed with me, other than my husband. I tolerate him.
Right.
But like, I'm very protective of my sleep. So this seems very odd that I would like having other people in the room, but I'm so protective of my sleep. So there were times in desperation in the middle of the night that we let a child get up between us in the bed. And I always would regret it because I would never sleep as well. Like I would feel the child moving around. I'm a light sleeper. I would wake up. So the long-term solution for me, and this was probably like 15 years of my parenting over all 6 of my children, was we had a constant standing pallet on the floor of our bedroom. And this worked out as the best way for me to protect my sleep while also appealing to this softy part of me that understood what it's like to want other people in the room. Now, some of my children, this wasn't an issue because they shared rooms.
Right.
Or if one of them happened to have their own room, they might be like, Mom, I'm going to like pull my blankets into the girls' room and sleep on their floor. And I would always say yes, like, yes, because I can so relate. For years, we had blankets and pillow just set up on the floor on my side of the bed. So when somebody like woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't sleep, I did not even have to get out of bed. I would just be like, fine, just lay down on the floor. So then I've got the benefit of I didn't have to get out of bed. I can fall right back asleep. And I also don't have this child kicking me in the night. They're like right there on the floor. They're happy and content and they just go to bed. This also worked out really well for when they were sick. Because when somebody was sick and they needed medicine through the night, or they were sick to their stomach and were throwing up through the night, and then they've got my bathroom right there, I would just be like, hey, I know you're not going to sleep all night. Just sleep on my floor, right? Then I'm there and I can help. I just felt this was such an easy solution that also appealed to my style as a parent and my own personal bias. I also would like to point out with this method that there was some natural deterrent. At some point, you're like, my bed is more comfortable than this blanket on your carpeted floor. I'm just going to go back to my bed. So it became like a natural independent deterrent too.
I think that this is an overarching message in our podcast is that there's not necessarily a right or wrong way. Like, it's not like everyone has to do it the way I did it, or everyone needs to do it the way you did it. Find your own style, find what you're comfortable with and what your kids are comfortable with, and it'll be fine, right? Yeah, I think my style definitely fits this thing, if the listeners haven't heard in previous episodes, that I'm a really good sleeper, right? I can fall asleep very easily. I can wake up in the middle of the night and fall back asleep very easily. And because of that, when a child would come into our room in the middle of the night, no matter what phase of sleep I was in, I would get up with that child and physically bring them back to their room. If they needed to talk about their dream or they needed to tell me something, I am up and I'm bringing you back to your room, putting you back down and then going back to my room. So the avoiding having children in our bed and our room involved me getting up and doing that, which is something for me as a mom, I didn't really mind doing, and it didn't necessarily disrupt my overall sleep. So that is the style of sleeper I am, and that is what we kind of defaulted to in our family. right?
Okay, yeah, that's very insightful. I totally see that. And this came through in both infants and school age, how
Yeah.
my primary concern was protecting my own sleep and what worked best for me to protect my sleep, which I will still argue to parents is one of the most important things you can do for the development of your child, right? Happy
Right.
parent, happy baby, whatever you can do to make life less stressful for yourself also trickles down to the effect on your child. For you, that wasn't a high level priority because it
Right.
didn't really disrupt your sleep. If somebody
No.
woke you up and you had to go walk down the hallway and go put them back to bed, oh my gosh, that sounds terrible to me. If I go through all of those steps, then I'm awake for like an hour, right? I have like
Right.
fully woken up and now I'm awake and trying to get myself back to sleep.
Right. So I sympathize with parents where they just say, okay, come on in, and they welcome their child into their bed. Maybe that's what works for them, and that is how the parent can get the sleep that they need. There's no judgment here. People can do different things to achieve what works best for them.
There's some driving principles here. One is we do always want to be encouraging our children to develop good sleep hygiene practices. There are some well-known tips and tricks for developing good sleep hygiene. The big one that gets talked about is the electronics. No electronics in the bedroom, no electronics 1 to 2 hours before sleep. The other one we talk about a lot is consistency. Consistency in the bedtime routine, consistency in the time that the child is being put to bed. Let me give you some other ones. A lot of adults and children respond better if there's no intense physical exercise 2 to 3 hours before bedtime.
Right.
No caffeine within 6 hours. For our school-age children, that's not as much of an issue. Another trick is for that child who just really has trouble settling down at night is to have them do something that is more of a like relaxing activity or boring quote unquote activity in their room or in bed in preparation for settling down. So my one child who I knew had trouble initiating sleep, we had a part of their routine was they went to bed a little bit earlier, but it was always to read and then go to bed. When doing that, minimize the amount of really bright light. So if it can be a table lamp versus a bright overhead or fluorescent light. So these are just tips and tricks that can work. I recently had the opportunity to ask a sleep specialist about other things that can help, and they talked about the number of apps that are out there now for adults to use to track their sleep and the different things that can affect sleep hygiene. So all of these change so fast, but the ones on the market now that are often come up are CBTI, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy specifically for sleep, and just allows you to track all of these things I just talked about. What hour did I go to bed? What hour did I wake up? How would I rate the quality of my sleep? When did I exercise? When did I last eat before I went to bed? When did I last have caffeine? To try to track for yourself in a log what is affecting these changes. A similar could be used for children. So I think there's an overarching principle here that we want to be establishing with our children the importance of sleep hygiene and these principles. But that's really what we're characterized by. It doesn't mean that we have to hold hard and fast to that to a T every single time. When we're going through a phase of nightmares or being afraid to sleep in your room by yourself, etc., then I think it's okay to deviate from that. In the second half, let's talk a little bit about what you commonly see in the office and how you counsel families there. Sylvia, one of the things that often comes up in the office with parents that are really struggling getting their child to go to sleep is melatonin. So do you have thoughts on that?
So what I usually offer in the practice advice-wise is I don't only get asked about melatonin, I get asked about a lot of different sleep aids and things that they read about online. Sometimes they ask about melatonin. Sometimes they ask about magnesium as a supplement. I also hear parents asking about Benadryl or Dramamine or NyQuil as a sleep aid for their child. And overall, my advice is pretty consistent. I don't mind a trial of magnesium. It's a supplement. Obviously, we calculate the dose weight-based for the child. But if they take magnesium and have a little bit of muscle relaxation from that, I'm fine with that. And I don't guarantee that that's going to do anything, but I don't think that that's going to hurt. And I give parents the freedom with properly dosed magnesium to give that a try. When it comes to other sleep aids like melatonin or Benadryl, diphenhydramine, or Dramamine, I usually discourage parents from using that too much. We want their children to establish a routine. We want them to be able to have good sleep and fall asleep without sleep aids and without the thought that they need to depend on sleep aids. This is the age where we establish that routine, and I usually give them advice on how to encourage good sleep hygiene and good routine rather than defaulting to a medication or a pill to try to achieve that. In addition, I do emphasize that melatonin is not an FDA-regulated medicine. So each tablet of melatonin that you buy isn't necessarily having the exact milligrams or content of melatonin that you think, because it's not a regulated drug. So I usually discourage the use of melatonin in children for that reason as well. There are diagnoses where sleep aids are prescribed, and usually that's the case where the diagnosis is made, other things are ruled out, and often in conjunction with a specialist, sleep aids are prescribed, whether it be melatonin, whether it be something like clonidine for children with autism or ADHD that really struggle with sleep. But that is not the realm of which we're talking about today, where it's just standard sleep disturbances in kids that are transient and can be resolved with good habits and hygiene.
Right. First line is always behavior. How
Yes.
are we targeting the behavior?
Right.
So Sylvia, you mentioned that you had children that woke up early consistently.
Yes.
So talk to me about how you handled that as a parent.
Yes, and this is from birth. My children were always early risers. We tried everything initially to try to get them to sleep later, be it pushing back the bedtime, having them stay up even later, and maybe they would sleep in. All these experiments were done in our household, and if we just pushed back the bedtime, what wound up happening is they just woke up and got less sleep that night because they were still waking up at 5 a.m. There was nothing that we could do to have our children sleep later than 6 o'clock. And we wound up defaulting to the other model, where if they were waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, our bedtime started at 7 o'clock. And I know for a lot of working families, they're not even getting home from work before 7. But that is what we defaulted to in our family, because they could go to sleep starting the bedtime routine at 7, falling asleep at 7:30, and then they would wake up at 5 o'clock. And we just shifted our lives around that early wake schedule just to ensure that they were getting enough sleep at night, the required amount that they needed for their growth and development. And that is the only solution that we found.
You know, I can remember vacationing with you and your children would be up so early, but there wouldn't be anything open. So what do you do in the hotel with your children awake at 5 a.m. where everything is still closed?
There was like a whole routine where we would bring games and we would play games in the room in the morning. Sometimes in the bathroom, I would be with the one child that was awake. We'd be playing Uno. And as children woke up, they would come into the bathroom, see us there, and join us and play Uno. This is how we dealt with the early wake when nothing was open, right?
So I need to ask, at home, did you ever try one of those lights that would switch from red to green, you know, play in your room quietly, and now at this time you can come out of your room?
Yes, we didn't have that light. We kind of did the poor man's version where I set one of those rotating timers. So I just plugged a small alarm clock into that, where even before they could read the time or the numbers, it wasn't enough of a light where if they were still sleeping, they would wake up. But if they woke up and saw the 12 o'clock was flashing on the clock, that meant that they could come out of their room. And if they woke up and it wasn't flashing yet, they didn't know the difference. They didn't know it was a clock. Then they knew that they had to stay in their room until that happened. So
I love this hack, actually, because all of those other lights, even though they're made to be soft, are stimulating enough that some kids, they will wake up. But this... It doesn't even have to be facing them. They could go around and look at it. Oh,
and the clock's not on yet, so I have to stay in.
Yeah.
And that time was set for 5:30, right? But depending on the parent's sleep pattern and what works for them, they can set that time appropriately.
Fascinating. Love it.
So hopefully in this episode, we outlined the way that sleep disturbances can present in families, and then maybe some tips and tricks on how to counteract that and set appropriate expectations for the family.
Yeah, I would encourage all parents to think specifically about your child, your family, your spouse, your family dynamics, and what works best for you. There's not really a right or wrong way to do this, but many different ways that can, in the end, still be encouraging good sleep hygiene overall and lead to that functioning adolescent, young adult who has good sleep habits of their own.
And I try to reassure parents that are really struggling with the early wake or the crawling into the bed at night that this all ends during adolescence.
Yes, it does.
No high schooler wants to come into your bed. No high schooler is knocking at your door at 6 o'clock in the morning saying, let's play. So it is a transient problem. And hopefully parents can remember those days when everybody was sleeping in your room fondly. It's not going to happen forever, right?
Yes, I try to remind myself of this when I have anxiety in the night and I'm thinking, okay, I've got 2 teenagers that are still out. They're not even home. I have another one that, did they plug their phone in downstairs or are they up sitting on their phone? There's another one like sneaking video games or whatever. Where were the days where my biggest problems were if they woke up in the night, they were going to run straight to me and wake me up.
So this is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.